Hi everyone, welcome back to the Reinventing Real Estate podcast.
And what an episode we've got in store for you today. We just interviewed Marcus Weeks. What did you think about it, Jenna?
I loved his approach, as our youngest guest, really giving advice to people entering the sector and how they can really, use his tips for using LinkedIn, but also, interview tips and how to really navigate moving on to the next part of your career as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I also felt like there were so many kind of little nuggets there on what the opportunities are in the market at the moment, what people are missing, networking tips, as you mentioned, and then key themes like co-living is the new build to rent, why matcha lattes are so interesting when you're selecting locations, and all will be revealed there. And also the build it and you'll come concept in Living is Dead. So lots and lots of insights packed into a very short episode, this one.
Yeah, and I think that just scratches the surface of everything he really delved into. So I'm really excited for the listeners to kind of get an insight into how, Marcus thinks quite differently and how that's able to get him to where he is today.
So without further ado, let's kick off the podcast today. Well, Marcus Weeks, welcome to our Reinventing Real Estate podcast. We're very, very excited to have you here, especially because you're not only an innovator in the industry, but you're also a good friend of ours and the firm. So very happy to have you on our sofa today.
Great.
And lots of questions I think we've come up with.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
When we were obviously doing sort of background research on you and speaking to you a bit more about your beginnings, and a lot of people know you from what you've created at Firethorn Living and then previously your sort of tenure at Unite. But winding back to school days, I think what we found really, really interesting was that sort of entrepreneurial spirit from quite an early age and how that sort of informed and grew out to, I suppose, what you're doing today. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that and how that all evolved and what it was.
Yeah, sure. It's quite a long time ago, so it was it's sort of, I suspected this may come up. So it's been quite interesting, quite fun, kind of reflecting actually on some of that time. But so yeah, I grew up on the borders of Scotland, quite a quiet kind of area. Both my parents, particularly my dad, was quite entrepreneurial. So he had a food manufacturing business in a quiet borders town, and I spent a lot of my childhood on industrial estates. So whether that was his manufacturing facility or whether it was other suppliers of his. So I grew up from quite an early age actually in and around commerce and business and transactions and product as well, which is something that no doubt we'll come back onto as it feeds through to development in terms of what we do now. But so having that sort of background, I stumbled across an interesting opportunity to start a kind of import-export business when I was about 15, still at school at the time, and I started off with a tiny amount of money, but eventually grew that through various Chinese contacts and spending time out in China, and creating a business again that evolved into product and importing product and exporting it to various places around the world. But that gave me a really early sense of deals, transactions, marketing, creating and delivering something people want. And that then took me into some traveling experiences that I was kind of fortunate to be able to do whilst running that business remotely through drop shipping, which was where you could effectively order from a supplier in China and have it delivered to someone else in the world without it ever having to come to you. So I managed to create this sort of small business around that, which gave me the freedom to continue my studies at school and also do some traveling. And then I ended up then really enjoying the built environment, and I enjoyed the development side of it, i.e. a bit like a product, building something, making something, and then selling it and hopefully making a product, hopefully making a profit. And then I ended up then going to university, to Brooks, to then move into real estate, and that's sort of how it took me through that journey. But I think thinking it back, what I really learned was confidence. I think it really helped me with being able to talk to people who were a lot older, a lot more experienced, a lot more kind of confident in themselves, and that then meant that I then got more and more confident. I think it helped me understand things like marketing, understand things like sales, and how to do business with people the other side of the world, and not just on the buy side but also the sell side. So yeah, it was quite a fascinating time, actually, when you look back.
Yeah.
It was quite a long time ago, but it's really quite interesting. Yeah.
I think that cultural nuance is really interesting as well, because did you travel out to China?
Yeah. We did a couple of trips out to China to see the factories of where the kind of various products were made, and quality testing, which is important, and just like you say, just spending time somewhere different, and again that confidence point, that ability to articulate what you want to someone in a very different language who's not familiar, is also something you have to spend time kind of nurturing and developing. So
I think what's really interesting there is that kind of combination of product and service that then I suppose transcends into the real estate industry, and understanding how to apply that. And as you say, sort of the sales and marketing side, it'd be good to understand that a bit more, of maybe some of the key lessons that you learned from that point of view. It's nuanced. It's obviously product versus property, there's a bit of difference, but ultimately it's a very similar thing. I think a lot of the mistakes were probably around investing in the wrong type of sales, the wrong type of marketing, targeting a different type of consumer than you should have perhaps being targeting. So an interesting one was a product we looked at, which was an airbag for motorcyclists, and that effectively was, if you fell off your motorcycle, the airbag would trigger, and it was fascinating, because the marketing was saying, well, people who ride their motorbikes don't necessarily want this. It's like it wasn't something that you perhaps thought as a non-motorcycle rider people would say, oh well, I don't need it, but in fact that was the case, and you learn through, and that showed that you can think it's something, but until you do the work behind it and the research and the real depth of it, to know where you're marketing it and placing it. So that was an interesting example of a wrong decision, because that wasn't the right thing to go down. But yeah, there are other things work very well. So yeah, it's interesting.
I really love that confidence point that you made, because I think Jamie and I actually had a startup before entering the real estate sector, and when we look back on it, I think we feel really similarly about that to have your own business from a young age, where you are the kind of sole drivers of its progression and success, not having any of those barriers in front of you, being able to pick up the phone to anyone, because if you're not picking up the phone, no one else is, is, I think, such an amazing skill, and perhaps is something that actually, when you think about people coming through, university, going straight into their first kind of role, and then building their career from there, never really get that exposure until a much more like mature age, obviously dependent on what business they go into, but having that exposure, knowing that you're like that key driver, and not having a fear of, what someone's going to say, but just having to get in the room gives you that kind of hunger and drive, and almost, I think, dissolves those barriers to entry. You just think, well, we've just got to get it, and this is what we've got to do to get there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and I think in reality, it's not until after university that a lot of people start having those type of discussions and realizing what's their style as well. Some people, that isn't their style. They're kind of, that's just not how they like to do things or want to do things. But if you have that natural hunger, the earlier the better you're starting to do it and cultivating it and making it work, which is something we do currently at Firethorn, which we'll come on to. But it's making sure you're harnessing the talent as soon as you can to make sure it's the best it can be during your career. But yeah, I mean, at school I wasn't that at all. It was really interesting for me because I was more insular at school. Actually, I wasn't as I wouldn't say I'm like a massive extrovert, but I'd say I'm probably leaning there on the scale. But that confidence piece really drew it out of me, and then I knew I had it. So later on in my career, I could draw on that confidence and take it down, rather than just starting it post-university.
Yeah, it's something you sort of cultivated throughout your years.
Yeah. But also I'd say that's a strength, certainly, but there was also weaknesses that I could pinpoint slightly earlier on as well.
What would you say was one of your weaknesses, or a few of your kind of critical weaknesses that you felt through that early period of creating a business helped to address, or helped to highlight maybe?
Yeah, I think detail is certainly something that I've had to work fairly hard on, pretty openly. So that's something that that I've known quite early on is not my particular strong point, but it's something I've worked on really hard. Creative. I'm not the most creative person.
That surprises me.
I've got a mum who's an artist, but
Wow.
I find I can be quite creative when it comes to structures, transactions, or commercial based creative
negotiation. Yeah.
But if you ask me to draw a dog, you would say, what's that?
You wouldn't recognise it.
Yeah, you definitely wouldn't. So I think it's different types of creativeness, and one is definitely not my forte, and one I'd hope is more of a forte. So yeah, I'd say that's probably two of the lesser established parts of my strengths.
Yeah, and I think that element of being able to think creatively, be strategic, and like respond to the market is such a kind of fantastic USP, because not all businesses are structured like that.
Yep.
They're kind of dictated to by the market, not held hostage to it. So it's quite interesting to have that real creative flair in terms of strategy, that you're able to pivot and almost be really opportunistic, depending on where the market is taking you.
Yep.
What other kind of benefits do you think from having that more agile structure?
I think it certainly allows you to do a lot. So you're in a fortunate position to be able to move quick, be very competitive. There's a lot of other businesses which are, as you kind of alluded to, but stuck in their ways in a bit, and they're more like moving tankers than just being able to make a decision in a boardroom. So yeah, it's incredibly important for me, and it's been one of the points that has led me to where I am now in my career, is being able to be somewhere with that agility and not just the agility, but also the actual substance behind it as well. The ability and the confidence to carry it through from just saying we're agile isn't really good enough. You have to evidence it, and that's what I wanted to make sure I could do in the kind of positions I've ended up in and doing in my career. I think it's important to though have a really strong foundation. So I think agility is brilliant, but I think you really need a strong foundation to be able to be agile. So, you know, in our world, that's a strong foundation in valuation, in capital markets, in operators, ultimately. And if you don't have that, it's very hard to be agile. But if you do, then the world's your oyster, I believe.
I totally agree with that, because I think the benefit of Firethorn Living is the agility, but backed by, you know, knowledge and awareness and what's going on. But I think if you're fleet of foot when you haven't got that, sometimes you can get a bit a bit stuck in looking at so many different things and not having a set strategy, which I know some people, especially fund side, when they don't have a specific focus, like student housing, co-living, build to rent.
Yeah.
You know, they're looking at everything all the time, which means that they're switching up their thinking all the time, but they're not specialists in anything.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's very true.
It's looking at it from that point of view of saying, okay, well, we've got the foundation in the living space, we've got foundation in hotels, therefore, like, what are we going to bid on this with, and how do we make it work, which is really refreshing. But I think I'd say it does lead you on to one of the negatives, which is, can you have too many external operating partners? Do you, or operators rather, do you kind of spread yourselves too thin as well? Because as we know, the industry we operate in is largely operational real estate, and there's a lot more to it than obviously the paper and how these buildings are run, how they're managed, how the well-being works, and the general student experience. And it's important to make sure you're conscious of that as a business and not spread that too thin that you end up losing the quality on the buildings you are developing. I think what you said earlier really struck me, in the sense of, you were talking about the fact that, you know, you might not be as detail orientated as others, and you might not be as, say, creative in the traditional sense, but creative in the commercial sense. And I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are also aspiring developers, aspiring investors, wanting to get into the industry, or in the industry, and might be looking for their next role. So I think what would be really interesting is someone who has interviewed a lot of people, has been at Unite, now has been at Firethorn, to sort of take us into the room of what attracts you to talent, and what is it? Because I think it's a bit different in your sense than maybe traditional businesses, that you get excited by it and you feel is fit for the future.
It's a really good question, and the answer is actually a combination of experience I had when I was being interviewed, I suppose, and also a combination of the values and the culture we tried to instill in the business. So I remember after my time at university, I then went to CBRE for 3 years. I did the graduate program. For me, that was quite a corporate environment, and I knew that wasn't where I was best placed for the kind of longer term for me, but equally a brilliant business and good to spend the time there. I then knew that I knew that the client side role would give me that exposure to the transactional element, a lot more coalface kind of involvement, which is what I was looking for at the time. And Unite, who were a good client of the business at the time, had a role for a kind of surveyor, type junior surveyor, just to come in and at the time look after new London-based land acquisitions. We had residential pricing coming down at the time. This was 2015, and when student values were climbing, it was a good time to try to look to enter the London land market. So I applied for that with my experience from CBRE and my kind of background we've talked through, and I always remember that it was Nick Hayes at the time, who used to head up the property business there. He said, "Oh, well, if you could talk us through some of the transactions that you've been involved in." And I I'm there thinking, okay, this is interesting. Where am I going to go with this? And I hadn't done the traditional investment agency seats. I'd been a bit quirkier in my choices around where I wanted to go at CBRE, and it wasn't the kind of big capital market seats where I could reel off, 5 or 6 interesting transactions that I'd perhaps done. So I think by that point I'd perhaps bought a very small buy-to-let and and in the receivership team at CBRE I'd sold a bungalow with a concrete disease called Mundic block, and that's
Incredibly niche.
And I had to be obviously really open at the time, and I think that that probably hopefully won a bit of respect for just to be really plain about it. And I what I did have though was a very strong valuation background in student accommodation and had spent some time in the industry, but by no means had I kind of been involved in buying loads of development sites or loads of kind of nice shiny London buildings. So I got quite a lot of confidence when Unite took me on from that, and I don't think they took a punt by any means, but I think they definitely took a bit of a risk there, perhaps compared to other people who might have been in the market. But equally, we were quite early in the real rise of student accommodation. So yeah, I went into Unite, and in the more recent hiring decisions through Firethorn, I've tried to really embed that experience that I had at Unite into the way we're doing things. So it's very much a kind of hire for character, train for skill type mentality, which was exactly what happened to me. I went into Unite and I had the character, the drive, the tenacity to make a real success of the role, and then I could look to apply that kind of philosophy to the hiring of more recent, perhaps younger team that we've been hiring in at Firethorn, where I can see that character and that drive is there, and then take it forward to hopefully being a successful hire. We're lucky we have a very low attrition rate. We have a low turnover for a business of sort of 30 now. A lot of people don't leave, and when they do, it's for other reasons, like moving country, for example. So yeah, that's sort of how I've adopted it. I think core fundamentals obviously non-negotiable in some ways depending on the role, but we definitely keep a really open mind. I think as well, we generally, and I personally also believe in supporting younger students. So before even university, I think that property is still very underrepresented.
Yeah.
Prior to university, I think a lot of people know about it through family or friends that they're lucky enough to kind of talk to or do work experience before university. So at Firethorn, we're very proud to be taking on a lot of placement students who are sort of sixth form. We take on around sort of 8 to 10 every year.
That's
do
brilliant.
pathways to property. I'm speaking at my old school actually in a few months and taking them from a tour of one of our development sites as well to really try and fire people up about real estate and talk about the industry and how great it is and what we can do, because it's a brilliant industry and there's some great minds and great people in it, but I'm a big advocate for making sure that we promote it at an early stage and then hopefully get some great talent into the industry.
What sort of character traits do you feel excite you, or you could pinpoint as, something someone would want to show or display in an interview with Firethorn, or generally, when they're going to do interviews, should they be showing? What character traits do you value?
Yeah. Another experience I had was that applies quite interestingly to this is autonomous working, and actually having the feeling that that someone can work quite autonomously. If you can point someone in the right direction, they can do a really good job of kind of sticking within what we need, but actually being able to take it on and own it and drive it forward themselves autonomously. So depending on level, that's quite important to me. Confidence is really important as well. I think again, depending on level, more junior it can take time to develop, but having that confidence to be able to talk about work that they've done, talk about experiences they've had, talk about how they see themselves fitting into the role, I think is really important, and also just having the eyes open to the role you're going for. So if it's understanding the background to the business that you're applying for, understanding the type of work that they'll be looking at, is really important. But I think that autonomous point for me is really important. If you're a part of a small team, you do need to be able to be quite agile in your thinking. And again, I think it's probably a bit of a trait of mine, but not taking no for an answer is quite important. I find that the world we're in and the experiences and the ups and downs we all go through various work related bits going on is always having to find an alternate route or an alternate answer. And I think someone who can demonstrate that they've battled through something where someone said we won't do that, or that's not the right way to do it, and actually someone who believes actually that is the right way to do it, or they've not taken no and they've found another route. Yeah. That for me is really, really important, because we're constantly problem solving in our industry. And I remember at Unite we were looking at doing some of these very big developments, and there was always an element of pushback to some of the larger transactions. Was quite big for the business, and it took a bit of tenacity and creative workarounds or structures to make sure that it was more attractive to the business, and they did it. So you just have to not take no. It's very easy to take no for an answer, but in reality I think that not doing that shows some real character and talent.
Yeah.
Speaking for us as well, obviously, as an agency that likes to position ourselves as innovative, and that's obviously, a lot of people associate that with us with the marketing side, but we also associate that with creative negotiation, ability to have deep relationships with capital, to understand what the key rationale is behind decision making. If there is roadblocks in the road, which admittedly there always will be within a transaction, understanding that that's not necessarily the end.
Yeah.
And it's also not necessarily what they're thinking, it's just an action that needs to be worked around. And so, understanding the rationale behind why people are saying no, and why people are making those decisions is incredibly important. So when talent comes to us and says, look, I'd love to work with you, that's ultimately one of the first things that we try and suss out and understand is, if you are in a challenging circumstance, how do you then deal with that circumstance? And how do you get creative? And creative, I mean, in the way that you mentioned earlier, which is commercially creative.
Yep.
Yeah. I think as well, I suppose what's interesting for ours is more around that kind of advisory piece, that, you're not there just to be yes men and affirm the opinions of the investor or developer. You're actually there to give your honest opinion and challenge those.
Yep.
Given that you're in a position where you have, an understanding of the market, what's going on in the market, and you need to be able to have the confidence. And I think that is a huge part of, it all feeds into each other, like the confidence, the autonomy, to be able to say, respectfully, I totally understand the reservation. However, this is where we see the opportunity in the market, and we believe that this is a really compelling opportunity to solidify that. And not just being on the other end of a call saying, yes, understand, okay, we'll kind of skip to the next opportunity. If you really believe in something,
Yep.
it's your job. And, wherever that takes the investor or developer, that's then, obviously ultimately their decision. But you've got to have some kind of confidence in your conviction on why you believe it's a good opportunity, not just be there to kind of be an echo chamber for on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. On the counter, it is also really important to listen to others in the business and make sure that you by no means want to come across like you're kind of bulldozing things through it all.
Yeah.
It's very much a considered approach, as you say, taking other views into account, and then coming to your own thought through conclusion and being able to articulate that. And that's the important bit, is also articulating it as best you can to the audience.
Well, that's like, what people say, which we love, which is strong opinions held lightly, and ability to collaborate and understand each other, and that emotional intelligence, which is ultimately the thread that weaves through.
Yep.
So you are the youngest guest that we've had on the podcast, and I feel like that is a real testament to your incredible journey and what you've been able to achieve in that time. I think that's also really inspirational for people listening or watching that are like looking to take their first steps into the industry and can see that they can with that vision and confidence really progress. But what do you think it was about you, your journey, your experience, that's got you where you are today?
I think I'm using the kind of jumps I've made to different businesses I've tried to time them right. So I think you can, and there's certain businesses you definitely want to stay for a longer term in, and Firethorn's certainly one of those businesses. But for me, I think understanding when the right time for you is to try something different or move on to a different chapter. There's no shame in that. There's no harm in it. I think it's healthy to try different places. So a good example being that CBRE being a fantastic business, but the corporate nature of it, the size of it, wasn't one I saw myself in for the longer term. And I think I was able to see that when I did and make that move for me, because that's what worked best for me personally, and it's obviously different for others. But having that ambition kind of helped me navigate to where I am, if that makes makes sense.
Yeah, anticipating when the right move is and where culture fit is, and also understanding ultimately what you're taking from each business, I think, as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's an element of gut feel to this as well, which we haven't really talked about, but that's another trait which I like to use. It's obviously has to be supported with other things around, but a good example is probably the Firethorn move, actually, where I'd previously got to know Chris and Pete through my days at Unite. Chris and Pete founded Firethorn back in 2018, but I got to know them well through my experience at Unite, and through that experience I could have more conviction and comfort about the type of organisation I was joining. And that's another point for your question, is I think taking opportunity and seeing opportunity and grabbing it. My school motto was Carpe Diem, which is quite cliche, but I do still carry that through. It's seizing the day, it's seizing the opportunity, and if you have an opportunity in front of you, it's usually a yes if it's the right thing, and if you can combine that with gut feel, the commercial kind of side of me, and the nature of wanting to keep pushing, then that's that's ultimately, I think, when you combine all that, probably an element of how I've kind of hopefully got to where I am.
So I think the lesson behind that is, if there is an opportunity in front of people, whether that's a new role, whether that's, you know, a new position, a new strand of the business, a new kind of avenue for learning, take it.
Yeah, I'd say take it, or at least really go and explore it. Go and speak to peers. Go and speak to more experienced people. Then at least you can have a deeper understanding of whether it's the right thing to do for you or not. And then you can make a more informed decision. But ultimately, ask around, because what you find is that other people are probably having similar thoughts in their heads. So it's fascinating when you do open out and talk to people. A good example being moving from Unite to Firethorn. I was thinking, okay, I'm moving from Unite, big beast, and obviously generates some great opportunities due to the people there, but also the nature of the name of being a big business. And I sat down with an industry friend of mine and said, look, you know, will anyone still send me any opportunities? Will anyone want to pick up the phone and talk about transactions and things, just because not because of the nature of Firethorn, but because we're just so new and new. So I was unnecessarily concerned at that point. But another trait I think I have is for a bit of over worrying in some senses. But I'd say that's probably a strength actually in other ways. But yeah, that then led me to another sort of conclusion, which was actually, yes, it's fine. It's nothing to worry about. You know.
I think that sort of leads on to quite nicely another question that we had, because a lot of our guests and a lot of people certainly who are listening to the podcast and feedback to us and message us and, you know, provide questions to us, often ask about, how can I make relationships with new people? How can I network? You know, how can I, if I'm not going to key conferences, reach out to people?
Yep.
What does that look like? And what are the kind of key tools and metrics that someone like yourself, who's probably like a pro at all of this and has created vast contacts and deep relationships across the industry, sort of give a bit of your secret sauce from a networking point of view?
Yeah. So I don't think you ever stop networking. I think definitely in our industry. I think LinkedIn has become a real transformer for this, and I know I've had messages from younger people in the industry looking to learn about how we might have done something or not, and I think that's how building up that confidence to reach out and message someone is point one. I think some people don't have the confidence to want to do that, which is fine. I think another interesting option is to find events that are inexpensive but have the right people there, and draw up a plan to target the right people at those events. So an example could be some of the smaller morning only type conferences that are popping up now in the sectors. They're inexpensive. Some very, very experienced people go to those, and I said at the start, you don't stop networking. And myself and the team who I've been working with, we're always looking to enter new sectors. So we are doing exactly that. Where we don't have the contacts in those spaces, we are talking to people on LinkedIn. We're talking to other contacts within the business. We're going to those smaller conferences where it's more closed. It's easier to speak to the types of people you want to, and you tend to find that contacts do know who you need, and if you're just starting out in your kind of career, I think making sure you're involved in some summer placement programs or work placements through the bigger agencies or even smaller developers like us is a great way to bed yourself in and network and get to know how things are done, and that often leads to more opportunity, which was certainly how it worked for me in the early days of work experience and things. So I think there's various different avenues for different character types, and I'd encourage people to really grab those and make the most of them, because people are very open and happy to talk about experiences and introduce them to other people.
Yeah, I think that's also what's so lovely about sort of the industry we're in, and especially the living sector, is that because it is a reasonably new sector full of, you know, maybe people who aren't thinking in a legacy fashion, there's a lot more collaboration and a lot more openness to new ideas and concepts. And, you know, from our point of view, obviously we came into the sector about 7 years ago now, and, you know, you would expect to have reticence, and we were very much welcomed by the industry, and the growth of the business has sort of been a testament to that, and how people have adopted Harris Studios and adopted a slightly, you know, quite a radically different way of presenting information, and then obviously the data after that supports that. But we didn't have that originally.
Yeah.
We had a hypothesis, and we believed that would be the case, because why wouldn't it? That, you know, you need to present things more interactively to show core capital, you know, projects in a much more enhanced fashion, especially when it's big design-led, experience-led operational businesses, rather than a 25-year lease to Tesco, you know, in central London.
Yeah, and also you started up, even pre-Harris Studios and the more digital side of it, you were starting up in a space which was largely led by the bigger consultancies, and you were targeting that niche for people or clients who wanted a more I won't say niche, but not really niche, because you're still providing the same brokerage and other services but a smaller business to be able to turn to, which when it comes to operational real estate can be really powerful, because it's about on the ground expertise and experience, and if you can offer that just as well, if not better, as bigger businesses, then there's a great niche there, which is also what I think you did well to.
Yeah, that's what we find. And we find that everyone is so open and continues to be very open, and now they've seen the sort of consequences of that, they're even more excited about it. But what I think, and what you mentioned about networking and LinkedIn, is how that's now evolving, and it's evolving really, really quickly, and that's why we try and put a lot of emphasis on it. But, you know, the personal branding side of things, the ability to have an opinion on LinkedIn, and obviously it depends on what level you are. You know, if you're a really junior level person, you're probably not doing thought leadership, but you're probably talking about your journey and talking about your experience, and that's why someone like Emily Kopp, for example, within our team, who's just moved over from CBRE about 9 months ago, she's got this new video series called 5pm on a Thursday, and she's got a new blog that's coming out which is talking about her first few months at Harris and how it's so different to what she's done before. So I think all of those things, and if you're someone who is new to the industry or not new to the industry, using LinkedIn is such a powerful tool, even if you're just messaging people or liking things or commenting on people's posts. It does help to create that connection. Certainly.
Yep. And also learn about, we come back to, you know, how can you learn as much as possible in the sectors or sector that you quite like, and LinkedIn is a really powerful way to get the latest research, to, as you said, hear what other people are thinking and doing and examining and exploring. So yeah, it's a great positive to the platform. It's interesting as well, LinkedIn, because you get the personal side to it, which is always the kind of the that people are
a bit more reticent.
But certainly I think from a work point of view, it's a great tool.
I suppose trying to add on to that point earlier, and I think definitely kind of coming back to your journey in terms of, age not being a barrier to success is a really interesting one just to hone in on a bit more, because I think people in, across industries talk a lot about kind of ageism, but what people don't look at is, and I heard this term in the office the other day, but youngism, which is about, people that don't feel like young people have the experience to kind of bring that value, bring that insight to the table. But I think that's a really interesting one, because obviously in the products that, we're advising on, younger people are closer to that product, than anyone else, and actually using that to its benefit. And as you say, like getting the most out of people's talent and experience is something you have to really harness. How do you find that kind of translates into Firethorn and how people are working on different projects?
Yeah, it's in our blood really, and it comes down from that early experience that we offer within the business through the placement as well. But ultimately, it's about seeing the talent as early as possible, harnessing it, pointing that talent in the right direction for the best of the business and the best of the individual. You're absolutely right that I think it's the core of operational real estate at the moment is a large amount of it is aimed at the kind of younger generation who are coming out of university and into the world and into the workplace, and having that on the ground expertise of experience that they're having is really good and beneficial to bring into the business. I think it's when you marry it with the more experience in the business, that's when it's really powerful, because the kind of the more experience can probably shape it and drive it into more of a strategy. But having the hunger and the desire there to pursue opportunities and push into your own niche, I think that's a big one for us, is not having not feeling held back enough to be able to move into a sector that you think is quite interesting and put it on the table as an idea. And we really encourage that from across the business, is to think about new ideas and put them on the table, and they always get a very good sounding board and a very good feedback, and in a lot of cases we do explore them. I think the culture ultimately comes from the top, and Chris and Pete have certainly driven that from the very start of the business. We make decisions as a team, and that's the team around the table, no matter whether you own the business or you might have recently joined in say an analyst position. Say everyone has an opportunity to give their opinion, and that's really powerful, because if you're someone who's just joined from university and you want to put your view out there, it's really encouraged. And I think that's important to grow the people in the organisation, and it makes ultimately people feel very valued, that they're having an input into decisions that drive the business in particular ways. So yeah, it really is in our blood at Firethorn. In all of our kind of thinking, and we spend a lot of time as a senior leadership team thinking about individuals, thinking about their pathways, their careers, where we've seen strengths or weaknesses, and how we think we can kind of work on those or improve them or what have you. So it's really important for us. I think it's also fed into our kind of lower attrition rate as well, because we're allowing that growth of people.
Also, what really interests me about that, and certainly sort of listening to young voices and championing young voices, is those are the people that are actually living or have lived in PBSA blocks, who are considering living in co-living blocks, who are living in areas that we're probably all targeting, or developers targeting for new developments, when we're looking at branding, we're speaking to these kind of young people on, is this something that's actually going to resonate with your demographic rather than just sounding cool and luxury, you know, from a real estate point of view? And what are the amenities and what are the services that you guys are actually wanting out of operational real estate, and not just guessing from the top? Because I think, you know, the sector can get into a bit of a group think of, okay, well, we have to have a reception desk as you walk into the building. We have to have a roof terrace. We have to have a karaoke room, a gym, a podcast studio, you know, whatever else. And actually, it's about constantly challenging that, because as we've seen Gen Z come through, and then we're starting to see Gen Alpha come through soon, what are those people going to start demanding, and is that going to be different? And it's about listening to those diverse voices, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, and that's why Pathways to Property is so important, because you don't just want to hear from one type of person, you want to hear from different types of people that are having different experiences within the buildings.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
I think as well, something that I use now as a kind of quirky metric when looking at locations for co-living was something actually that cropped up when we were on a site tour, and one of your younger colleagues said, well, where would a resident get a matcha latte around here? And like, it's funny, but it's true. Yeah. And like, they're kind of hitting the nail on the head there, because it's, okay, well, these are what young people want, and like, where are they going to get that in the local vicinity? It's about lifestyle. It's about kind of access. Yeah. And if you can't provide that, then, you know, maybe that is something that needs to be looked at more. You know, where is someone getting their local coffee? Because that's how they're making these decisions, not just on what's self-contained in these buildings, but actually what's the micro location. And, you know, those types of insights come from younger people, because that's what they're thinking when they're choosing where to live.
Absolutely.
So like, we've got to be adopting that into the way that we're scouting out great locations.
I think the next time we do a report with Verve Life, we're going to have to do a matcha latte
metric.
index.
100%.
Sponsored by Firethorn or something.
Yeah.
Included.
Love it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you're absolutely right. And it's not just the physical nature of the buildings too. I think it's the online experience as well. It's the marketing behind it that they're seeing online. Is it, you know, as you pointed earlier, is it just what the group at the top think is the right thing, but actually is it positioned at the right type of cohort who are going to be interested in it, and is it an easy booking journey?
Yeah.
Is it 2-3 clicks and you've booked the room? Is it 10 clicks and drop downs and all sorts, and that doesn't work. So it's that insight flows for me all the way through from your building, your location, your amenity, but also all the way through to the whole journey and the whole experience of actually living there too.
I suppose sort of looking at the developer landscape and seeing what's going on in the market and how things are evolving.
Yeah.
Where do you think the opportunities are right now, and where do you think opportunities are gonna be popping up over the next few years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd look at some of our theses to give a bit of background, but as a kind of wider context, it's a very tricky time right now in the developer space, on the back of a lot of increasing costs over the last few years, and things that are widely talked about, but some of the listeners who perhaps aren't as clued into the property industry will kind of want to understand. But there's been a lot of cost increase that we've seen. We've had more regulation come into the sectors through renters' rights bill, through Gateway as well. So the market, as well as tackling those, is having to deal with quite an interesting macro environment in the UK and the economy that a lot of us know about. So that's kind of a bit of a backdrop. We've sought to align our investments with theses that have more tailwinds, I suppose, in these type of sectors. So student accommodation is an interesting one because it's largely aligned in the right locations to our brilliant export of education in this country, and in the right cities, we believe longer term that is a really, really resilient place to be, that other countries just can't really replicate, given the strength of some of the universities and the kind of cultural nature of some of them. We're really interested in the affordable space as well. So we've recently entered this space through the kind of hotel/hostel type concept, which is effectively very affordable hotels in very very urban areas where average hotel rates for single rooms are extremely high, and we're seeing early success of similar type of concepts in big cities. So we're doing Dublin and London as two of our new ones, which is really exciting. But really targeting that affordable core, where the probably demand is arguably the biggest. So that's interesting. We're also really interested in the co-living sector. To my point earlier, where you have a kind of large amount of capital looking to enter our bed space. If you look at projections for portfolios for 2040, it's a very, very significant expectation of holdings will be within the living sector, and we think that BTR is still a pillar to that, but it's been very hard to build, and we expect that co-living will seek. We think co-living will sort of, I guess you'd phrase it as
leapfrog.
Yeah. That money chasing the kind of BTR will be forced to move into co-living, where it's actually been a more viable product.
Well, I think we're already seeing that, aren't we? We're seeing a lot of capital coming from co-living from build to rent into co-living because of that, and also because of some of the occupational challenges we've seen in PBSA this year. It seems that capital is coming from both sides into co-living.
Because you've got that diversity of the resident base as well, which makes it a lot more resilient and not reliant on that single demographic or an international demographic. Actually, it's used more, domestic, and there are a lot of kind of benefits in terms of the breadth of what we're seeing from the kind of co-living demographic as well, that often surprises people, that it's actually skewing older and older. That's it.
And co-living is built to rent.
It's studio led, built to rent.
Exactly. It's a market naming nuance to me.
Exactly.
It fundamentally is built to rent.
Agreed.
Co-living is built to rent is on the record, Marcus.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Agreed.
So we've talked about opportunities.
Yeah.
And let's now talk about what are developers missing, and what do we need to change in terms of mindsets of people moving into this new cycle?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to look at other tailwinds in other sectors as we enter a cycle where we have an aging population, which is really interesting. We have an aging population, we have considerable wealth in part of the country tied up in housing, that I think creates some interesting opportunity for developers in that later living and care space. It's very nuanced, developer by developer, as to which of those they quite like, but I think that's a sector we'll see grow in maturity over the next 5 to 10 years, as we see that wealth look to sort of liquidate in some respects, and whether that's, and specifically I see more of a rental aspect to the later living as well being really interesting. So retirees looking to liquidate their kind of assets, houses, whatever, and want to be in a community that provides a really kind of fun, more youthful environment that they can get a lot out of. And I think the rental retirement space could be very interesting to provide that. I think that more and more people now are renting, and actually we're seeing that a lot of the older generation who are coming up to more retirement have actually got experience through rental through their grandchildren, and
That's a really good
Yeah.
point.
and it's really interesting, and
Really good point.
and naturally there is a perception to think, well, there's probably not as much experience in rental, so would they be comfortable with moving into more of a rental product quite later on in life? But actually, there's evidence to show that that's changing, which is really interesting. So that's one kind of sector that I think's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's
See.
interesting. I think that point as well about moving from ownership to rental, because it's actually something we touched on with Dan Batterton, because he was saying that something that you find with older people is like a fear that if they go from owning to renting, that they'll have to move a lot more. People will kind of sell,
Yep.
while they're renting, and then they don't want that transience. But obviously with build to rent, later living, senior living, when it's professionally managed, you don't have that fear that it's going to be kind of sold from underneath you, and you do have that security and longevity there,
Yep.
which kind of solves one of the main barriers to entry for them, which is, you have the security of renting here for as long as you would like.
Absolutely.
So you've heard it here first. Later living is what you're missing.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see where that sector heads.
One question we love to ask all of our guests is
Yeah.
if you could reinvent one thing about the real estate industry, what would it be?
I thought about this from an element of what's my bugbear with the sector and the industry. The nub of it for me is the archaic nature of our entire kind of real estate structure as a country. We have a lot of understandably older concepts that feed through mainly through the law, but I'm kind of conscious we're in a world now of I want it now, I'll order it now, it'll be here in 5 minutes, etc. And I'd love for us to have a far more fluid transactional nature in this country, because I want to make sure that the industry is really exciting for younger people, and I think that will help to make sure it is, rather than a continually slower type of progress with more regulation, etc. I'd love to see that change, and it's a big thing to say change as a whole, but I think the smaller changes we can try and make as a country to try and generate or speed up that progress and just make it far more user friendly. So that's my big kind of macro reinvention piece, but one idea could just be around land titles and using AI perhaps to create a far more user-friendly land title system to make conveyancing quicker and drive more transactions and make things move quicker. So yeah, that's kind of my bugbear.
And when you talk about the sort of transactional side, are you
Yeah.
saying, like, for example, in America, you've got
Yeah.
this kind of really swift transactional process that deals take 6 weeks rather than 6 months.
Yeah.
And, everyone's just powering through and people are taking views on things and the whole setup is based on speed. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, in a way, I want I accept that there's a level of the population who want and some cases do need to be on the rental market, but I really think that and do believe in the idea of still owning real estate, and I it frustrates me when people have found a house to move in with a young family, or they've got a young child on the way, and it's sort of time pressure to move. I would love for the real estate industry to be able to be lined up and have the technology or the systems in place to make that family be able to be in there in 6 weeks, not 6 months, or even 12 months, or never if things fall through. And that kind of frustrates me, because you generate a lot as a country in terms of additional tax, additional revenue to various companies through having people being able to move. And if they can't, it generally slows all that down. And that's something I'd love to see loosened up for the benefit of the country as a whole, but also for people who just want to own a house and move in and just live normally, rather than quite an archaic system and things taking things longer.
Marcus, thank you so much for joining us today. That was a really insightful conversation, to say the least. We've talked about everything from matcha latte indexes to build it and they will come as dead, and co-living and everything in between. And I think there's lots of insights that people can take from this, including, how to network, how to do a job interview, how to be in a job interview, when the right time to move is, and so much more. So your insights are really appreciated, and we're very grateful that you joined us today on our Reinventing Real Estate podcast.
Not at all. Thanks very much for having me. It's been great.